Oh, hey, I'm Chuck. Welcome back. Let's make a table. So last year I entered the Instagram Builders Challenge. The challenge was to make a desk, and I figured I would use this walnut slab that I've had lying around for a while as the tabletop. It did have some cracks, and I filled it with epoxy, and then I just sanded that away with a belt sander. The board definitely needs to be flattened, but it's too large for my joiner or my planer, so I'm just going to make a really simple router sled and flatten it that way. So this is a pretty simple jig. I'm just cutting two pieces of plywood to the same height and screwing them into my workbench, making sure they're parallel. I'm going to use my largest bit, and I'm going to use a router sled to move back and forth and take real light passes. Make sure that your workpiece is shimmed up so that it doesn't wobble back and forth as you flatten it. You won't take much off on your first pass, but as you gradually move the router bit down, you'll eventually wind up with a completely flat side. But I screwed up, and I didn't tighten my jaws enough in the router, so the router bit came out a little bit, and now there's this huge gouge, which isn't a huge deal. I just need to do more passes, and my workpiece is going to be thinner than I thought it was going to be. So it's just more work, but no big deal. With one side completely flat, now we can just flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. This board has one end that's a little bit wider than the other, and I'm going to keep the live edge, so I'm just going to cut off the back piece and the two ends to get it all squared up. We just got to sand this sucker because those lines that get left behind by the router are a real pain in the butt to get rid of. I'm going to be sanding pretty aggressively, and I don't want to undo any of the work that I've already done in terms of flattening it. So what I've done is just drawn a couple of lines on here so I don't go over the same place twice. Once I got this whole slab flattened and squared up, there were some cracks and some knot holes that I needed to fill, so I'm using some walnut, sawdust, and some 5-minute epoxy mixed together to fill those. Except this epoxy has cured. I guess I need to go back to the store. Son of a... Finally got the tabletop done, and now I need to figure out what I'm going to do for the legs. I was thinking metal legs, but I don't think I'm going to have time to do that. So I have this poplar here. I'm going to go ahead and use that and cut it down, maybe paint it black. I don't really know yet. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I cut everything to 3/4 of an inch. And then I cut them to rough lengths just so I can kind of start to plan out what I was going to do. I kind of came across a conundrum. How the hell am I going to join all these together? I could use pocket holes. Pocket holes wouldn't work. And I could use a half flap joint for some of them. But what do you do when you've got 3 pegs coming together all in one area? I wasn't sure the name of this joint, so I asked Reddit, and they said it was a castle joint. If you know the name of it, or if you just think of a cooler name, leave it in the comments. Either way, it solves my problem, and it's super satisfying to put together. So right now I'm just going through and kind of labeling all of my different... Which one of these is H and which is I? Now that's H and that's I. Now that's H and that's I. And why are they right next to each other in the alphabet? Anyway, so in order to cut the castle joint on a router table as I'm doing here, my stock is 3/4 of an inch and my bit is 1/4 of an inch, and it's set to a height of 3/4 of an inch. It took a couple of test pieces, but I was able to cut a pass right through the middle. Now on the 2 mating pieces, we're going to take 1/3 the width off of both sides. And if you've done everything right, you should have a nice snug fit.
Now we're not done yet. Grab your 4-pronged piece and use that to line up your bit in the center of your stock.
Looking pretty good.
Now lower your router bit to half the height of your stock and support the back of the prong as you pass it over the router bit. So a little piece broke off, but not a huge deal. I cut a new piece and I used a climb cut, just running it over the router bit backwards, and that seemed to work fine.
Ooh. Woo. That's nice.
So at this point, I'm basically just putting together what I have, planning my next cut, and then taking it apart and just doing that over and over again. Seems like a good time for a montage.
Sanded. You have no idea how excited I am to put together all these. I grew up with Legos, so I am especially excited. So I'm going to glue this up and then I'm going to stain it black. To get that glue up done, it was just pure terror and panic. Drawer sides cut and all of our drawer fronts dadoed. Now we just need to cut a groove for the drawer bottoms to go into. Oh God. Oh. Thank God. This back right leg was sticking up like a full inch. But once I got it on the actual ground, it's actually flat. Woo! This ping pong table is not flat at all. It's fine. Yeah! It's done. And I'm not touching it anymore.
It's finally finished, and I am pretty excited with how it turned out. I ended up using railroad spikes as a last-minute idea for drawer pulls. This was my first year doing the Instagram Builders Challenge. I didn't end up winning, but I learned a ton on this project, and I wound up with a pretty awesome desk. If you want to check out the winners and the other participants, there was a lot of really awesome work. You can Instagram the hashtag IGBC6. I've already registered for the 7th Builders Challenge, and I'm just waiting on the plans. If you guys would like to follow along on this year's challenge, or you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, and that's about it, guys. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you next week. I'm gonna glue this up, then I'm gonna do any final sanding that I need to on any joinery that didn't come together.